Hey guys, this is Paul from Smart Easy DIY. Welcome to the next video in my garage build series. So this is episode 14 in the garage build series. I built these big attic style trusses for my garage and I wanted to document it and share the process with you guys. So they are some pretty lengthy videos, so I'm going to do it in a two-part series. This is part 1 of 2. So this one is going to be just about getting it all laid out, figuring out how to do that, and then cutting all the materials, kind of walk you through the process that I went through to cut all the materials for that. So let's get started. So what I did first is I got some prices from different companies. I got 3 different companies that priced them out. And for my snow load, based on what I needed, I gave them my elevation and location and all that stuff. So they figured it all out based on snow load. So then what I did is I was able to take their prints. I did an average of all the 3 prints based on the snow load and everything like that, spec'd it all out. I priced it out and decided that I could save about $5,000 by building my own. And we've built a lot of trusses in the past with plywood gussets and PL glue, things like that, nail them really good. But it depends on your location whether your inspector will allow that or an engineer will sign off on that, so you'll have to see. And based on this is a garage, I don't have any problems here in this area with that. They have no problems with that, so I can build my own trusses. So that's something you need to check into before you decide if you want to build your own trusses or not. So I'm going to go through and make an entire video about building these trusses, so hopefully it'll give you some good ideas if you do end up wanting to do it, kind of thought process, how it all works. Hopefully I can explain it in a way that makes sense. So first of all, what I did is I know that my floor is flat and straight right here, the edge of my garage. It's nice and straight going down through there. And so I decided to do this before any walls are in the way or anything, because I wanted a nice flat level place to do this. So to give myself a reference line, I measured in 1 foot and snapped a chalk line all the way down through here, so I have something to go with. And then I knew based on my graph kind of what I was looking for size wise. So I know I'm going to go 32 feet exactly where this meets on the bottom quarter of the truss all the way across, because the top of the wall is going to sit right here. And the way I'm figuring it is sheeting is going to go on the outside of this, so I'm going to keep my sheeting down a tad so it's not interfering with this. But I'm figuring this exactly 32 foot to the framing. You can do it however you want. If you're doing 32 foot to the outside of your sheeting, then that's how you want to do it. So the way I'm doing it to keep it simple, I'm going 32 foot to the framing on the walls, and then the sheeting is going to go past that. So just to show you kind of how I did it. So I started with that. Got myself a line and made 32 feet. And then I came over here and found center. And then I was able to measure off of my floor, because I know my floor was square. And I got a center line going all the way up through here, past the peak. And then I was able to cut an 8/12 pitch on the peak of my pieces here, because I know that this is an 8/12 pitch is what I'm going for. So I cut an 8/12. I got these in place, screwed them together. This is all just temporary. So I screwed them together, and then I knew based on my drawing pretty much exactly where the peak was going to go. I didn't know for sure exactly, because I'm going on 1/4 inch per foot scale on my drawings, but I was able to get it really close. And then what I did is I could tell kind of based on how this works that whether this was standing open or closed a little bit. So I moved it up and down to where I got it just where I wanted. So this is going to be an attic style truss where I have some room upstairs for storing stuff, living quarters if I want, whatever I want to do. So it's going to have a 14-foot opening here. So that's why the center is beefed up with a 2x10. The tops are beefed up with 2x10, but then they went with 2x8 top and bottom back there. And I figured out based on laying these out here, I just let it run wild for now because I know this is a 12-foot. I let it run a little wild. And then I figured out exactly where this lines up with my line down here at the bottom, and then where the peak lines up exactly on center this way. So that's how I could get that. So my goal was to try to figure out what is the whole outside perimeter of the truss, because I knew what the bottom was, but I was trying to figure out what the top is, because I don't care so much what the inside part of the truss is. I want to know what the outside is, because that's what's going to matter. So I wanted to get an outside line on the top part here. I just laid a piece here and I picked out the straightest boards. You want to pick out the straightest boards for this if you're going to do this, like the straightest material. So I laid this in place into where this lined up. I got the peak up there lined up. And then I snapped a chalk line on the top part here, because that's what I want to go with right here. Once I got everything set, I kind of put some screws in temporarily to try to get this all in place. So this is a full 16 foot right here, and I had cut those exact as well. And then I figured out, I made a center line on this one. I got it right here on center, as you can see. Excuse my double chalk line there, but the pencil line is what I'm going with right there. And then to figure out this attic space up here, I wanted 14 feet on the width overall. So I figured out from center, 7 feet each way, where this goes. So this is going to be a 2x4 that goes up there, which I didn't cut that yet. But as you can see, I chalked that out. And I did the same thing over here. Got that one chalked out, so now I know exactly where those go. And then I got a collar tie going across the top here, so I can chalk that out. So that's going to be the finished bottom part there. So it's going to go from here up. And then I got a center one going in here, so I got to figure that out yet. But at least I know those things. I could snap those out on the floor. So that's really nice to be able to visualize. Once I get all those important pieces done, then I can figure out the webbing that's in here. So I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then once I get that all set, then I can figure out how my gussets are going to be. I kind of got those drawn up on paper, but I'm going to show you those as I go along as well. But I wanted to show you kind of the most important for me was to get the outside perimeter, whether that's bottom cord, the bottom of the bottom cord, top of the top cord, all the way around, get those dimensions all snapped out. Then I could get my pieces in here, get them screwed together temporarily, figure out exactly what I'm doing. So like these 2x10 16s that go in the center, I knew those were going to be exactly 16, so I got those all cut ahead of time. I knew these up here were going to be exactly 10 foot with an 812 on the top, so I got those all cut. The unknowns were these right here, so once I figured these out, then I could go through and cut all these. I didn't cut that one over there yet, but once I get that cut in place, then I can figure out this. And I checked from side to side to make sure that all my measurements are exactly the same. Because I don't want to have these trusses off a little bit and be like, well, I got to make sure in case they're off a little that I set them all one way on the building. I wanted them exactly the same. So I knew that all my math was working out. Everything was going to be exact. That's my hope. So now the next tricky thing that I wanted to figure out was the overhang on the edges. So I wanted to cut this ahead of time. You might have to sometimes trim them a little bit, depends on when you set it on the building. If things aren't exact, you want to get your fascia nice and straight. You might have to do a little trimming, but I wanted to get it as close as I could. So I wanted to show you my thought process, how I went through this, never mind some of these marks here and stuff. But what I did is I basically just used a rafter square, squared off of this, and then once I had that, I measured with my tape, because I knew I wanted 20 inches total with the outside of this. So I mocked this up with a scrap of 2x6, because I know I'm going to do 2x6 fascia. I did a little scrap piece here that represents 5/8 inch roof sheeting. I'm going to do some 5/8 plywood. So I wanted to put this on here to see exactly how this is going to come out. Because if you know anything about drip edge, you know that you don't want this one to come down too far or this one to go up too far. You want to be able to make so they don't interfere with your drip edge here. So I wanted to make sure that this was in place where it needs to go, the fascia. And I wanted to give this as much to meat to fasten to as I could. Now this really is irrelevant kind of if it's exact and all that, because I gave myself a little bit to work with. Since the steel soffit that I'm going to do is going to sit on here and it's going to go back against the building here, fastened to some kind of ledger board back here. It's not going to hit on this at all, but I wanted to give this as much to fasten to as I could. Like I could have cut it up here so it's never in the way, but then this bottom part of the fascia wouldn't have much support. So I wanted to cut it as close as I could, but yet give myself a little bit of room to work with. So I figured out where this roof sheeting is going to go, where it lines up for height, and then this fascia here is going to sit like this. So then that's how I came up with this number. As I'm working along here, hopefully this all made sense, kind of how I was explaining my thought process of how to lay this out. Hopefully it gives you some good ideas. Now, if you'd have a wood floor to do this on, like a normal house would, this would be a lot easier because you can screw these fast and they don't move. This one I have to be careful to follow the lines exactly because it's on concrete, so it could move around a little bit. But once you get the first one, everything's set, then you can use that as your pattern to build all the others on top of. Then you don't have to worry about it ever going anywhere. My next step, now that I got all that figured out, the overhang, got all these cut, and I'm cutting, there's 29 trusses total, so I have to cut 58 of everything of these that are doubles, so there's a lot of material in this. But yeah, next is the important ones for this attic style truss is to get these uprights figured out here. That's going to be the opening in the middle, and then this as well. Once you get those established, then you can just kind of figure the rest out as you go. So I got those. So what I did is, yeah, I just figured out the long point measurement, which is 61 3/4, and I knew this was square down here, and up here was a 34 degrees. So I did that, like it's an 812, like the top. So I got that one in there. So that was a known. This one over here was a known. Got those in there, made sure they were the same. And I got this top support right here, the collar tie, got that in here. And then once this was in, I could figure out what this was. And then when I went through and did this, I wrote it down like a 69 7/16. My writing isn't the greatest there, but I wrote that it's 56 degrees. So I did a little bit of trial and error to figure that out. It's 56 degrees. 55 just wasn't quite right, so I went 56. So I got that set, and then this was 20 inches long point to long point, and I knew that was going to be 34 degrees either way, split in the center, then just a square cut there. So I got that, made note of all that. The one thing I didn't know was over here. I did a 4-foot spacing from here to here. It's kind of pretty much center of what this overall opening is here that's left over. So I did another upright for the webbing here, the bracing. So that is the same. It's just a 34 degrees on top, square on the bottom. So the one tricky one that was an unknown was this brace going up here. So once I had this one set and I had this one set, then I knew that I wanted to be right there where those two meet and right where these meet. So I just set a full 2x4 8 on top of here, uncut, and then just set it here and used the square and figured out what this angle was, which was a 49 degrees in my instance. Over here it was a 14 degrees in my instance, and I cut it a little bit long just to make sure, and then it worked out good. So that's what you do. You just get it close, and say if I didn't get this angle exact, if it was 50 and this one was a 15, then I would want to have a little extra to work with. So I usually leave it like a quarter or so long, and then you can set it in here, make sure this is going to fit, and if it's too long, see how the angle is here, then you can just kind of work it in close that way. So I like to do that, and then this is going to come out pretty good, where this right here is going to be a 2x4 8 with the two pieces, so I can get all that out of one 8-footer. This one over here, I can get this upright and this upright out of an 8-footer. So it's going to have this left over, and I'm going to use it for blocking or things down the road, but this is pretty much a 2x4 8. So you can try to figure out what works best in your instance. If you can get it out of a 12-footer, that might be okay, but a lot of times 2x4 8s are the cheapest. Even if you go a 12-foot, you might pay the same as what you do for two 8-footers. So even if you have a little bit of waste, you're trying to minimize the waste, but chances are if it's got a 3-foot chunk left over, you're probably going to use it for blocking somewhere in your building. So that's kind of how I figured it out. So you kind of have to just figure out what works best for the size you're going, the amount of material, and all that stuff. So that's just to kind of show you how I figured out what it needs. Okay, so I have my lumber all sitting over here. The garage site is over there in the back, but I had all the lumber stacked here at the edge of the parking lot. And so I decided I'm going to set up my cut station over here to get all the truss material cut and get ready to go. So now I wanted to show you a really simple cut station that I built, since I'm going to be cutting a lot of material. What I did is I just used these sawhorses, and the nice thing about these ones in particular, they do have a spot where a 2x4 can go there. If you don't have that, that's okay. But I just did that to kind of stiffen it up on this side right here. So then I screwed 4 2x6s together. I just put some 2x4s under here to tie them together every so far. Then this makes for a nice comfortable working height as well. So what I did is I set my chop saw up over here because I like having material to this side. I like cutting from the right side because I'm right-handed. So then on my chop saw, and it might be different on yours, I know this is a miter saw technically, but it's 3.5 inches height, which is exactly a 2x4 on edge. So I just put some 2x4s on edge and I screwed them up from the bottom. So that way there's no screws in the way. I don't have to toe screw or anything like that. And I set them up every so far. So when I got out here, I did it a little under 8 feet. So that way if I'm cutting 8-foot material, it's like here, and I set it back from that. Same for 10-foot material. You can see right now that's a 10-foot material. Same for 12-foot. And then I figured 16s can hang out over. This board here is a fence back here to keep your boards in line. So I squared it off of my existing fence here with a straight board. You can get some miter saw stations that are very secure. This is a cheap DIY in the field to do it like this. And yes, it requires putting a few screws in, but I'm going to be cutting like 56, 58 of these guys. So I'm going to set up a repeatable fence. So what I did, first of all, just to walk you through the process, is I went through and cut all my center pieces for the bottom cord of the truss exactly 16 feet because they come like 16 quarter inch, 16 foot, 5/8 inch. Sometimes the ends aren't square. I like to check them because sometimes the factory ends are good, sometimes they're quite a bit out of square. So I like to re-square them if they're not, because I like to have these as close as I can. And I'll show a picture on the screen here of what my truss layout is going to look like. So the very top of the top cord, they are 2x10 10s, and they are cut at an 8/12 pitch on the ends, because that's what I'm going to do, 8/12 pitch. So I uncovered them all. They're going to be exactly 10 foot. So I want to show you kind of how I'm doing this. So if you want to know, if you've never set up an 8/12 pitch or anything like that, if you have a square, which you have to get a big one for something like this. So first what I did is I got 10 foot exactly, because I know I'm going to cut them 10 foot exactly. And then I set this up at an 8/12. So the way you do an 8/12, for this you want to go with the common cuts. So it's this one right here, not the degrees. This is degrees, this is common cuts. So for this, if you set it right on 8, right there, so this point right here is right where you want to be, and this is on 8, then you can see it follows my line here. I made a line. It is also, if you look at your degrees, because your miter saw is going to be degrees, is 34 degrees. It's very close to 34. So it's close enough for that, usually. So I'm going to set this here. So what I did is I set my saw up at 34 degrees. And then if you're going to do a lot of repeatable cuts, what I like to do, so I set this up, got this block squared off with a square off of this, so I know it's square. And then I set this right up with this one in mind. So when I go to cut this, it'll be right at 10 foot to the long point. I'll check my saw, make sure I'm still on the exact thing. And then the other thing that you want to do, anything on trusses you want to do, is you want to crown up. So to explain that, see how it crowns to the right? It bows to the right, right there. If you look on this side, same thing, it curves to the right. So that would mean when the truss is in here, you want to turn this crown up. See how it crowns up like that? So the crown will always be up, no matter whether you're working on the bottom cord of the truss or the top cord of the truss. You always want to crown up, because what happens is when there's weight on the roof, like snow sitting on there and stuff, it'll only push it down maybe straight, but if you have it already crowned down, it'll only make it curve down more. So even if I'm cutting the bottom cord of the trusses, I'm still crowning them up. So everything crown up. Always remember crown up. So when you're going through to cut all these, just remember to always turn your crown up, because your long point's going to be up, and then you know that they're all ready to go. So really quick, on the bottom cord of these trusses, since I'm crowning up, I like to mark them right away when I'm cutting them. So I put arrows. You can see that one is crowned that way. I always put arrows there. That way when I go to grab them and I'm assembling these, I know that they're already ready to go. So I do that when I'm cutting, so it saves me a step when I go to assemble. Okay, so I'm cutting all the bottom of the top cord on the trusses for this. And I'll show you my layout, how I figured out where this goes, or how this goes. So this is the top this way, and I cut this angle here, which is an 8/12 pitch as well. And then I cut this, which is exactly square with this. So I'll show you here how I did it. Again, I set up a stop. For all these different things, I set up a stop. So I just screwed a couple blocks together here, and then this one I did perfectly square with the fence that's here. So first I went through and squared all the ends. I knew I had a little bit to work with on these. They're 2x8 12s. So I have this much to work. So I'll show you the process, since I have to do 2 angles on this. This cut here that I do later with the circular saw is not as particular as this cut. So this one, I do it right with the jig. So once I get the first one set up, then I can do them all the same. So this is the only one that I've had to do 2 cuts with. So once I do that, then I slide it out here, and I know that it's a 5 3/4 measuring down along with the cut. Then I can just set the square here and square it. And like I said, this one isn't quite as particular as this one is, because this is all going to get covered with soffit. 2x6 fascia is going to go here. So I'm actually giving myself a little bit of room. That's the process for cutting these guys. Since I got to do 2 cuts, that's the easiest way that I found to do it. Since I have 29 trusses to do, I got to cut 58 of these guys, because there's 2 per truss. So today, since I'm doing a lot of short pieces, I set up the canopy because it's so hot and give me a little bit of shade. This leg is a little bit in my way, but not too bad because I'm doing most of my chopping here. And as the shade moves along, I could hop over the sawhorse with the leg, which I probably will do. But right now, this works out pretty good. It protects me for the most part. And I was just going to talk about those upright pieces that I'm cutting on the trusses. So again, I had showed you earlier about the stop that I made and this platform that I made. So it works really good. So I'm cutting the biggest pieces first, then whatever I have left over, like here, I'm going to make a stack and then just set all the cut off pieces to the side. And then when I go through, I'll go cut all these at once, all 58 of them. And then I'll go through and cut those once I'm done with this setup. So once I have a stop setup, I like to cut everything at once because it's so much faster. So just kind of to show you a little bit of the process of that. The last ones that I'm cutting here, I have some leftover stuff. So I can't get two out of one piece, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to get rid of all the bad ends as much as I can. Some of them I'm going to cut shorter for in the peak, that little short piece I got to do in the peak up there. Some stuff I try to look like for stuff like this. So big knot holes. So just using whatever I can and cutting off whatever I can't. I'm going to use them for blocking, for all kinds of stuff. Anything that's longer like that, I like to save for different stuff. So I'm cutting these center pieces for the very top. See how they're angled, split in the middle. So I'm just cutting them, letting them run wild for now. I'm going to trim them off later, but I'm just doing this end. And I'm a big fan of saving time whenever you can. What I did is I cut this 34 degree on the one side, and then I measured what the center is this way, which is 1 3/4 inches. And then I lined it up the first time, and I made a mark right here on the saw, right where this long point touches. So every time I know when I go to cut this, as long as I'm right at that thing there when I'm done, it comes out in the center every time. So that's just a big time saver instead of having to measure this every time. Whenever you can, do some kind of reference thing like that, and it'll save you so much time. All right, guys, so I'm getting ready to lay out my truss here, and I'm going to do plywood gussets, 3/4 plywood, really good quality plywood, and I'm going to template this. So what I did is I just had some cardboard. I actually did this back in the winter before I laid out my trusses because I wanted to figure out how many nails I'm going to use. So that's what all these are. I just did approximate. I don't like to skimp on nails. So I did an approximate, so that's why my bracing is off a little bit on the drawing, but it gets the idea. So I laid these out here, and you can do this if you want to try to visualize what pieces you're going to need, what size and all that. So what I did here, I decided I'm going to make this bigger. I laid it here, and I want to get a little bit more strength in this part right here. So for example, see, that's where the joint is right there. But I want this to catch this 2x4 here. So I made this bigger, so it's going to come 4 inches this way. So it's going to be a lot bigger than what that is. But this one should be good, should be sufficient. And I'm thinking I'm going to cheat this up a little bit because most of the purchase is going to be in this already. So I want it to be a little bit more up here. So I'll probably cheat that up a little bit. But so for up here, did the same thing. This is actually a multi-purpose piece. That's why it's taped. So this one represents this side here. And like I said, my drawing isn't exact, but this is close. So that tells me like how big I want to make this. And then this side, when I flip it over, actually when I flip the tape over, that's why it's multi-purpose. Then it's going to sit over here on the heel very down here at the bottom. And then you can see what that looks like. So that's going to be for that one. And then up here, so I got the peak one up here, got that one figured out. And then also that one I might cheat it down just a fuzz. I want most of the purchase to be up there in that part, but I might bring it down into this 2x4 a little, but probably not very much. This one should be good where it's at. And then this one here will be the same as over there, of course. So that's what this is all about. And I might do the same since I have a lot of purchase right here in this big 2x10. I'm going to probably do that a little bit and get this 2x4 a little bit better. So then this one here is multi-purpose as well. That's why it's this size. So this is the one for up here. So I did that so I can visualize that a little bit. So you can see between all those, I have everything covered. Because I have that one over there. I showed it over there because it's kind of marked out for there. But it's actually, can be for here too. So then the next thing to do once you get all that done is get a count on how many you need. Because the way I do it for these ones right here, you're only going to need 2, of course, per truss of these and these. But everything else, you're going to need 4 per truss, because you're going to need 2 on that side, 2 over here. So that's 4 per truss, and that'll be the same for all of these ones besides the very ones up in the peak there. The other thing is, on my end trusses, I only do these gussets on one side instead of both. Then when the sheeting goes up on the outside, that'll take care of that. Also, the end trusses, I'm going to build nailers in here every 2 feet probably to fill in this. It's also going to get a wall framed in and a window framed in there later. But that's going to be down the road when I know for sure which ones are going to be end trusses. So the end trusses are going to get only gussets on one side, like I said. So that comes into consideration for your count. And also because of the way I'm doing it with attic trusses and doing the stairs, I have to do a single end truss and then I have to do a double truss 4 feet back to leave an opening for my stairway. Then I'm going to frame them this way with 2x10s on edge. But for that reason, I'm going to only need enough for 27 trusses instead of 29 trusses because of the 2 end trusses only having it one side. That kind of counts as 1. And then these double trusses, since they're going tight together, they only get gussets on the outsides of each one, so that counts as 1. So hopefully that makes sense, and then I think I've rambled on long enough here. Now I was going to show you this plywood that I'm making this out of. This is beautiful 3/4 inch, and you can see it has 5 plies. It's really nice stuff. It barely has any voids in it at all, like any place I've checked. It almost makes you cry to cut this up for truss gussets, but I wanted something that's really solid and really strong, especially since I'm going to do attic-style trusses. If it wasn't attic-style trusses, I'd be a little bit more lenient on what I would allow on there probably. But with this, I want to do this good 5-ply, 3/4 inch plywood, and then also do PL glue and also the nails. So I'm going to nail it really well. So that's my plan. And I was going to show you a little bit how I laid this out. So I apologize for the shadows here. So based on whatever your sizes are for your gussets, you can lay a sheet out. So what I did for this one here, I picked a size and I flipped them over, figured out what I need to split one, and then that came out like 32 inches, so I had that much left over. So then I ended up modifying one of mine a little bit to make it work because I want to maximize what I can get out of a sheet. So that works out pretty good for the size that I'm doing. Now the size that I'm doing right now is a little bit different, where it comes out where I have to rip a foot off, but I'm going to use some 12 inch by 12 inch. So I'm going to get 4 pieces out of that later for an example. So I cut a foot off this end, then I rip 20 inches off. So for example, you can see I'm cutting right here. I got twice as many out of a sheet on those ones as I do on these ones, but I'm keeping track. So my majority I want to get is that one, but then I'm keeping track because these ones come out good for a sheet. So I'm trying to maximize what I can get out of a sheet and doing different sizes together. So you kind of have to play around with it, you know, with layout, with numbers, and see what works the best. And I'll kind of show you the process of how I was doing at least certain ones of them. Now the setup I have for today, you can see I still have my miter saw stand set up because I need to cut wall studs later. So I got my canopy set up, which is really kind of nice for this, and it'll help me with the shade. So what I did, I have some of these flip top supports, these rigid ones. You can use different ones, but I weighed them down with rocks. You can actually hang weight on them right here if you have a cable and some weight, but I don't have a way to fasten them now, so I'm just stacking rocks in there and they don't move. And then I decided to build this platform, just a cheap platform I threw together with some 2x4s that I had left over. So I just made a platform so that I get lots of support when I'm feeding this through here. And then once in a while I have to rip one coming this way. That's what this one is for, is just to help support to get the first one cut through there. Now, if you've never operated a saw before, you're going to want to research how to do that. Make sure to do it safely. I would recommend wearing safety glasses, gloves, earmuffs, all that good stuff. Protect your ears, protect your eyes, So nothing in this video really is about saw safety. I just wanted to mention that, but make sure to research whatever saw you're using. Make sure you're comfortable with it if you're going to attempt something like this. So what worked good for me is, since I have a pile of lumber here, once I mark this one and cut the foot off of it, then I slide it over here. Then I can slide this over before I start the saw up. So now I just have to make the tick mark. I don't have to cut the whole thing since I'm going to rip that with the saw. Then I leave about a saw blade width, like an 1/8 inch. So that support helps me out right now to get this lined up. Then I stack these all up. I like to cut them while I'm at it because that way I don't forget. Now this, I'm just going to freehand this and get it as close as I can. It doesn't have to be exact. Also, when you're ripping a bunch of stuff like this, it's really handy to have something like this. It's a dry lube with Teflon, and you spray it like on the table saw, any kind of stand supports that you have. Even on this table here, I sprayed it on there as well. Just makes everything glide so much easier. Put it on the fence along here. I'll include a link down in the video description below the video where you can find it if you want, and it's super helpful. Makes everything slide so much easier. Alright guys, another thing worth noting on the plywood here is usually, the way I understand it, the strength of the sheet is this way, as far as, like if you're looking at your truss and you want to lay your gussets out with the 8 foot this way, 4 foot this way. Like, so as you can see, like I have all these going like this, and the truss is like this. So no matter which way you do that, you always want to turn them this way, sideways, if that makes sense. The wide part of the sheet, think of the wide part of the sheet, the wide part of the gusset. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, as far as I understand it, the way that the layers are and stuff in there, that you always want to do that. You don't want to, say for example, you don't want to turn it like this, even if it makes more sense in how your sheet layout is. You don't want to turn it like this because the strength is going the other way. Wow guys, that was a long day. 756 plywood gussets out of 48 sheets of plywood. That's a lot of plywood. 14 stacks. There's 54 in the stack. So I did the math, 756 plywood gussets. What took quite a while was all these ones with different angles, pitches on them. Those really took a lot of time, but I had very minimal waste. So after about a 14-hour day of cutting plywood gussets, I had to get them, just lay them down here to look at them. They look so good. I'm so excited. It looks like a lot of plywood, but this truss is going to be seriously overbuilt. It's not going to go anywhere. So tomorrow I'm going to get some PL, some nails, start putting these together. Alright guys, so the next video is going to be about putting the trusses all together. All these pieces that I cut, getting them all assembled. So that's going to be coming out next on the channel, so watch out for that. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know your thoughts so far, and thanks for watching guys.